You know, the thing is, when you're looking at an election, you're doing what you always have to do in life, which is you're trying to arrange your inner life with the outer world. That's the whole secret to life. Most people are living in their imaginations. Most people are not telling themselves the truth. Why? Because they want to feel more important. They want to feel better than they are. They're telling themselves lies about themselves. But you want to see the whole picture. And the whole picture is hard to see because, first of all, you're a little person. You haven't got, all of us are small. We don't have the big canvas in front of us. And we fill things in. You know, the scientists will tell you that your eye has blind spots in it, but your brain fills in those blind spots because it knows what's supposed to be there. Well, our imaginations do the same thing. We don't know what people are thinking. We don't know what the country is doing. We don't know what the world is doing. Our imagination fills that in. Our imagination is keyed into our feelings, and people are trying to manipulate your feelings all the time. So it's very easy to get confused. And that's what I see when I look at the media today. What I see is the media trying to manipulate our emotions. And it is, to me, it's the biggest problem this country has. The debt, maybe it's up there, but really the fact that 8% of the country, the radical left, is governing 85% of the communication industry, which is the news business, the academy, and Hollywood, and trying to mess with your mind. So all you have heard is that Trump, in talking a lot in his closing arguments for this election, has been talking a lot about the border. And Cassie Dillon was down at the border, and we're going to have her on later on in the show to tell us what she saw. But they keep accusing Trump of spreading fear. He's spreading fear. All he does is spread fear. In the front page of the electronic New York Times, a former newspaper, they had, Trump ends the campaign spreading fear and hatred. So Grabian, our friends at Grabian, who make up these wonderful montages, put together a montage of the media telling you that Trump is spreading fear, followed by the way the media has been talking. Let's compare. This is really interesting.
They are actively engaging in the fear-mongering and the lying and the hatred and the racism. Donald Trump and his erratic behavior could be leading the United States towards World War III, could be leading America towards a nuclear war. We had the nuclear clock when we were all growing up. It's probably closer to midnight, Mike Barnacle, than any time it's been since the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The president and his team are trying to drive up fear and rage when it comes to these migrants coming up from Central America towards the U.S. border with Mexico. Let's turn to North Korea. It is building up to this sort of doomsday nightmare scenario.
The president has fully embraced a dark anti-immigrant message in the hope that stoking fear will motivate voters to reject Democrats. We're going to have either a junta in the next 3 years, or we're going to have the Romanovs. The amazing power to destroy this planet that's in the finger of a president of the United States.
With President Trump holding rallies all over the country, sinking to new lows with his lying and fear-mongering, he sounds deeply troubled. He sounds unhinged. This is why questions about his fitness for office are so urgent. This is the biggest story that I see happening right now.
So what they're trying to do is they're trying to affect your imagination, because your imagination fills in the parts of the world that you don't know about. And your job is to keep your imagination in tune with reality. It is not to say that your imagination is not sound. It is to say that it is easily manipulated by both sides. The problem is it is the left that owns all of the communication industry, and they are selling this kind of craziness. This is why, by the way, the left, when they speak, everything they say is so foolish and small, because they have taught themselves, using their imaginations, that they are virtuous, and they do that by cutting out the rest of the world, by cutting out actually the way the world works. You ever meet a pacifist, a guy who says, "Oh, I'm a pacifist," and you think, well, are you a pacifist? Because if you were actually a pacifist, a guy who wouldn't fight under any circumstances, wouldn't you be dead by now? Except for the fact that you're surrounded by people who do those jobs for you, the police and the military. The police and the military are willing to fight to keep you alive, so you're not really a pacifist. You've just deputized other people to do the violence for you. By excising those people from your imagination, it makes you feel safe. That is why Americans who feel so safe and have been so safe for so long say such stupid stuff like, "Oh, all cultures need to be respected." Are you joking? Are you joking? All cultures don't need to be respected, but they just have because we're so safe, so surrounded by good police officers and good military people who will defend our rights, we excise those people from our imaginations and we think, oh, this is a wonderful world. It's so peaceful. It's so lovely. It's so nice. That is what the Democrats have been selling when they sell you universal health care, and they say, well, like Bernie Sanders, I happen to believe that every country should have health care. And you think, well, yeah, they don't have health care. We pay for their health care by paying more for medicine and by paying for their military and pay all the things that we do that they don't do for themselves. They cut that stuff out. So you listen to them and you listen to what they're saying. And the virtue signaling is all based on imaginations that have excised the rest of the world. This Google-eyes Cortez woman, Ocasio-Cortez, who keeps saying all the stuff we should have. And you ask her, like, how do you pay for this stuff? She has just excised that portion of reality out of her head. And this is what the media does. So I just listened to this wonderful clip she's on with that guy. What's his name? Ramos? Is that his name? And he actually asks her, how are you going to pay for this?
Medicare for all. Mm-hmm. Is it too expensive?
No. People often say, like, how are you going to pay for it? And I find the question so puzzling because how do you pay for something that's more affordable? How do you pay for cheaper rent? How do you pay for, you just pay for it. We're paying more now. So it's not that we're saying this whole system is free. It's saying it is free of cost at the point of service. So that means that you're not delaying going to the dentist. You're not, because you don't have the cash at the point of service.
Number 9, tuition-free public universities for all. Who'll pay for that?
So we already pay for tuition-free K through 12. And in the same way that we made a decision as a country to say we need to educate people to a 12th grade level, our economy has evolved, and that means we need to make the decision to educate people to a trade school or collegiate level.
So when you cut out, I get so puzzled when people ask me how you're going to pay for this, how you're going to pay. And she thinks it's going to be cheaper because she's thinking of all of America's money as one big pool of money. But of course it's not. It's money that individuals have earned, and some individuals have earned more of it than others, and some have just got more of it than others through luck or birth or whatever. It doesn't belong to her. By cutting that out, the fact that she's stealing from people at gunpoint, she cuts that out of her imagination. So she doesn't have a real sense. Why do you want your imagination to be as big as it can possibly be so you understand the ramifications of what you're talking about? This small-mindedness on the left, this small-mindedness on the left is how they have convinced themselves, that everybody on the right is a bad person. Paul Krugman wrote this piece, unbelievable piece in the New York Times on Knucklehead Row in the op-ed section. Paul Krugman writes, it is now impossible. It's impossible. This is impossible. It's impossible to have intellectual integrity and a conscience while remaining a Republican in good standing. This is the pablum that you get if you read the Knucklehead Row in the New York Times. Some conservatives have these qualities. Almost all of them have left the party or are on the edge of excommunication. In other words, if you do not agree with Paul Krugman, you can't have a conscience. You're a person without a conscience. Those who remain in the Republican Party are either fanatics like you, willing to do anything in pursuit of power, or cynics willing to go along with anything for a share of the spoils. And it's foolish to imagine that there are any limits on how far a party of fanatics and cynics will be willing to go. Anyone who might have had a sticking point, some uncrossable red line of bad behavior, has already taken the off-ramp and left the party. That is what they think of you. That is what they think of anybody who votes for Donald Trump. He's a madman, and therefore, you must be a madman. And there's nothing you're not willing to do. So if there's nothing you're not willing to do, there's nothing they won't do to stop you. You want to hear this in a clip, Mika Brzezinski, who seriously must have forgotten to take the pill this morning, her mental pill that keeps her sane, because she just flipped out. I mean, this is nuts, but it's just the way they are thinking about you because they have not got a full perception of reality. Listen to Mika Brzezinski.
The rhetoric of this racist, heartless, soulless man will lead to more violence. Yes, I said that, and a lot of Americans believe it too. They see what is happening to our country. This is a so-called leader with no shame. He doesn't care. He's got no sense of decency, no sense of duty, and no limits, and this is important for everyone to understand, no limits of what he's capable of doing to stave off any humiliation for himself, the humiliation that his desperate actions suggest, is that he knows what's coming next Tuesday. It could be bad for him. There could be subpoena power. There could be impeachment. He knows he's on the line, and he will do anything to save himself.
He will do all imagination, right? He will do anything to save himself. Will he mobilize the army against you? Well, let me give you my theory of Donald Trump. I'm going to give you my theory of Donald Trump. Because 8% of the country dominates 85%, and I'm making that number up, but it feels like they own 85% of the communications industry, the academy, Hollywood, and the news business. Because of that, they have done this to themselves. They have convinced themselves that you can't have a conscience and be a Republican, and that you're willing to do anything, and there's going to be violence. She says he's a soulless man. Trump doesn't even have a soul. This is a soulless hunk of zombie flesh who has taken over the White House. They have convinced themselves that this is the world. And because they've convinced themselves that this is the world, they can say anything about us that they want, and they have. And they've created this world in which all of our opinions are not just wrong, which is fine. They're welcome to disagree with us, but they're evil, right? They're racist. They have that thing, the dog whistle. You don't know you're a racist, but I know you're a racist because when you say X, it really means Y. I mean, it's a nutty Orwellian way of thinking, but it's the way they think, and it's been going on for years and years. And finally, the people of this country got angry enough to send a guy who was willing to be called those things: racist, homophobic, sexist, Islamophobic. He was willing to be called those things. They bounce off him. They just bounce off him like he's wearing, armor. He doesn't care. A guy like that, when you outlaw speech, which is essentially what they've done, only outlaws will speak. And a guy like that is going to be an outlaw. He's going to be a strong man. He's going to be a different kind of person. He's going to be, I always hate this phrase, the alpha male, because it's redolent of apes, and I don't think we are apes. I think we may share ancestors with the apes, but we're not apes. But it's the strong man. Let's call him the strong man. It takes a strong man. It takes a rude, boorish, big personality to stand up against the kind of rhetoric these guys have been dealing out to the rest of the country for all this time. Now, Americans don't react well to strong men because we are a liberty-loving people, and we know that strong men take up too much space and do bad things. We're used to strong men in government being tyrants. And that goes back into time. There's an evolutionary theory that strong men dominated human tribes just like they dominated ape tribes until we developed language and spears and weapons. And then people started talking to each other and said, you know what, if we get together and we all have spears, we can take this strong man and chase him out of town. If we don't kill him, we can just get rid of him. And that's where they theorize that's where ideas of liberty and equality come from banding together as a band of brothers in order to chase the strong man out of town. When we see a strong man, some light goes off in our heads and we become wary. We become afraid. We say to ourselves, you know what? We got to watch this guy. He may be a tyrant. Trump could have been a tyrant. Before we voted for him, I thought, I said there's a 5% chance this guy is a tyrant. But he's not. He's just not. Nothing he's done has been tyrannical. He hasn't silenced speech. Twitter silences speech. Google, Facebook, they silence speech. They are tyrannical. Donald Trump is not. He hasn't violated the Constitution by, say, using the IRS to silence his political opponents. Obama did that. Donald Trump hasn't. He hasn't done, whenever somebody tells him that something is unconstitutional, if they have authority, he stops. He'll sign an executive order. A court will say, nope, you can't do that. He does something else. He tries again. He is constantly, when he's talking about the border, he's constantly said to the Congress, pass laws. I'm not going to do it. It's Chuck Schumer who waved the pen at him and said, no, you do it with your pen, Your Highness. Trump won't do it. Trump looks like a tyrant. He sets off some atavistic light bulbs in some people's heads that say, oh my gosh, he's a tyrant. But he's not a tyrant. He is not a tyrant. And so we have this world in which they're acting like children in an imaginary world. They're acting in their imaginations, and we have to try and bring them back to reality. But the thing is, and this is true, whatever happens today, whatever happens in the election today, we lose some seats, we lose the House. Even if we lose the House and the Senate, which I don't think is going to happen, but even if that happens, in the aftermath, when the smoke clears, there will be a political adjustment to whatever has happened, and we will go back to being a fractious, noisy, chaotic, revolutionary country. We will still be America. We will still be the last best hope of people, of the last best hope of man on earth. We will still be the light, the political light of the world. We will still be the country that everybody turns to find out what is going to happen next. We are still what we have always been. We are still the freest, best country that God has ever made. It's going to be this way tomorrow, no matter who wins. So go out and vote. Fight your corner. Keep fighting your corner. But may fobeste. Do not be afraid.